Today's episode I was not honestly planning on doing. It just kind of happened. I was watching Pluto TV, which for those of you who aren't aware, Pluto TV is an app that combines what television used to look like back in the day and combines it with streaming. I think it's better. There are certain channels that just show Star Trek, sitcoms, there's a few horror movie channels, and so I love that content. Lately, Halloween 6 has been on quite a bit, as well as H2O and the one after that, Resurrection. I randomly decided to start watching Halloween 6 as I had not seen it in a long, long time, and almost immediately started hating every minute of it. To be honest, I didn't remember watching it as a kid much. I mean, I remembered certain things. I remember the whole Tommy Doyle thing. I remembered Jamie getting impaled on farm equipment. But I did not remember much about the plot or just, how it related to the other films. I took it at face value as a younger person. So I was so angered and upset by the film experience and the incompetence and all that, which I'll get into. I decided that I have to do an episode on it, which is this episode. I'm not sponsored by Pluto TV, just a fan. Want to throw that out there right now. So here we go. The first of actually a few times when the Halloween franchise died of indifference. I hate this movie, despite the fact that in writing this episode, I had to watch it about 6 or 7 times, to the point where I almost got to at least, empathize for it, but still, here we go. We get the first of many fast, short, flashy MTV-style cuttings. "Uncle, don't hurt me," not Jamie says. She's being wheeled in a hospital gurney. Of course, it's not really Jamie because they didn't either want to pay Danielle Harris a little more or couldn't work out the contract. Whatever it is, there's a few different stories floating out there. It's not Danielle Harris, and she is the only Jamie in this franchise that I will recognize. Not right. It's not right. Jamie is a great character, and this movie completely disrespects her character on top of not casting Danielle Harris. Period. Also, MTV-style cutting was cutting edge in the mid to late 80s. It's, at least in movie universe, 1995, but hey, the execs thought, hey, the kids are going to like it. Totally out of date. Stupid idea. If you've ever seen Rocky IV, you get the same idea. Lots of weird montages, and again, we see flashes of random stuff from the movie that hasn't happened in the movie yet, but we see it anyway. Michael walking around, the man in black, steaming pipes for some reason, etc. Dum. It's clear not Jamie is giving birth. The scene is stretched out and annoying looking because the director or editor decided that it should convey Jamie's current mental state of being in labor and probably being drugged. It looks crappy. It looks amateurish. The first video camera that I got as a teen had some built-in quote-unquote special effects, and this sequence with the picture being stretched out and kind of warped looks exactly like one of those preset quote-unquote special effects in that camera. It looked crappy then, it looked crappy in 95, it'll look crappy tomorrow. It seems like they're in a boiler room of some kind. They almost immediately transfer into an underground stone cult area with candles and torches and stuff. It totally works, except it doesn't. It comes out of nowhere and raises questions such as, did anyone pay attention to anything in this film being consistent with itself? Not Jamie is in labor, the man in black is there, and he takes the baby once it's born. Next, we are in a creepy sacrificial altar type place where they are doing some ritual and anointing the baby to be America's next top model, or something. We get voiceover during this by Tommy Doyle, played by Ant-Man himself, Paul Rudd. And I believe this is his first movie. At the very least, the credits say introducing Paul Rudd. I think they give him a middle name because in the 90s it was law that you had to have a middle name as an actor. Paul Rutherford Rudd. Something like that. Who knows? Anyway, Michael was a person and killed people. He had a terrible legacy, blah, blah, blah. That's the narration. Dude, this is Halloween 6. We know this already. Nobody's cold watching Halloween 6 and wondering what is going on, not having seen at least a few other Halloween movies, especially in the age of streaming. The voiceover reiterates, at least in this timeline, that Mike wants to kill his family. He also introduces his conspiracy theory that since Jamie and Michael haven't been seen in 6 years, that someone has captured and hidden them both away. So there you go. It's been 6 years since Halloween 5. At least they got the math right. One of the nurses has a crisis of conscience and gives the baby back to not Jamie and helps her escape. We get another random single flash of a knife as they exclaim that he is coming. They run through the pipes because this is a combination submarine Manson family-style underground hideout in caves. Not Jamie leaves the compound or submarine or whatever, and the nurse runs back in. She is met with Michael Myers coming from the darkness. One of the rare upsides to this film is that Michael Myers' mask in this looks pretty good. Certainly better than the next few movies. I would probably even rank it in the top 3 of masks from the series, at least the original run. Which is strange considering I hate this movie, but hey, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Michael kills the nurse. We get yet another single frame flash of Michael holding a knife, and not Jamie is running up a spiral staircase. It seems to be perpetually raining in this movie, even when people are inside, at least in the cult compound. But hey, it's cool and creepy and artistic, right? Yeah, sure, whatever. She ends up outside where it is thundering. There's a storm, lots of lightning and fog. I must warn you ahead of time that in this movie, almost nothing but lightning and thunder are around every time there is a night scene. Every time. It takes place over 2 or 3 days, where every time it's dark, or even sometimes when it was daylight a second ago, it's now dark and thundering and rainy and foggy. Yeah, weather, I guess. Not Jamie is in some kind of junkyard, industrial, train yard place, and some guy who works there tries to help her. Not Jamie steals his truck, and Michael kills him for his trouble. Not Jamie drives away in the rain. Cut to a Strode Realty sign and a house decorated for Halloween. We get more single-frame flashes from scenes in the movie that haven't happened yet, and a paint-by-numbers demonic voice that says, "Danny." A young kid wakes up from a nightmare. It's Danny, whose mom is like in her early 20s, but he's like 6 or 7-ish. Kind of doesn't make any sense. I'm sure no one will notice. Even though he's awake from his dream, the man in black is in his room at night with a knife, and ooh, scary. It's almost like this is a much crappier version of the nightmare real Jamie had in the beginning of Halloween 4, just done super lazily and with no tact. Kara Strode, his mom, comes in and tells him everything's okay, yada yada yada. Her son Danny is having nightmares about the scary man in black with an evil voice. It is still thundering and lightning out, because it always is. She, for some reason, takes a drawing off his wall. It's got the thorn sign on it. What's the thorn sign, you ask? Well, more on that later. I will assure you that it's definitely not a crappy, convoluted plot that this whole film hung its hat on. Kara Strode is technically Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis's cousin, at least in universe. You can imply that as the film mostly glosses over it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. In her bedroom, Kara is listening to Discount Howard Stern on the radio by candlelight. Why? Who knows? The radio show is talking about Michael Myers and taking calls from the audience. They are mostly unhinged. Kara looks at the picture her son drew and sees the thorn symbol. She doesn't look at the back, as that would ruin a crappy future plot point, and it's very obvious that he did indeed draw on the back, but whatever. This is as good a time as any for Kara to strip down to her undies, because hey, you gotta pad the runtime somehow. She then discovers Tommy Doyle is spying on her through his window with a camera. She angrily closes the curtains. The radio establishes that the town has banned the celebration of Halloween for several years, basically since the events of Halloween 5, and that this is the first year that they are planning on having a celebration. Discount Howard Stern will be broadcasting live from Haddonfield this year. He also states that Jamie and Michael were killed in an explosion. Retcon alert. This did not happen at the end of 5, or at least not that we saw. Also, did I mention it's still raining and thundering out, because it always is in this movie over the course of the runtime? Constant thunder and lightning, and it's so disjointed and anti-continuity. At the very least, this is supposed to be happening at the same time as Jamie is stealing the truck, etc. Or should I say, not Jamie. Tommy Doyle, across the street, the little kid from the first film, allegedly, is also listening to Discount Howard Stern. He calls in and tells a weird, creepy story and comes off crazy. You know, about him being a kid and Jamie Lee Curtis was his babysitter. Yada, yada, yada. He's recording the broadcast on reel-to-reel for some reason. He gets another single flash shot with a scream effect and some lightning, again for no reason. Tommy Doyle sees Michael is coming back, and this time, Tommy will be ready. How does he know all of this? Well, that's not important, or even explained, in any version of the film. Meanwhile, Loomis is in his cozy country cottage in the middle of nowhere, writing on a typewriter. He is also listening to Discount Howard Stern. The radio mentions Loomis was dead. Real Loomis chuckles and talks back to the radio and says not dead, but just very retired. Meanwhile, it is still raining and thundering outside. Ooh, scary. And Loomis has a visitor. It's Dr. Wynn from the first movie. Meanwhile, Not Jamie is still driving and comes across a bus depot. More lightning. She parks, gets out with the baby, and enters the bus depot to find it basically deserted. The desk clerk is on break. Also, the bus depot is playing the damn discount Howard Stern radio show over the loudspeaker. No one in this movie is not listening to this friggin' radio broadcast. Even an abandoned bus depot. Jamie gets into a phone booth and calls the police despite having no money and just being in a hospital gown from, coming from the cult birthing center. But who knows? Whatever. Logic doesn't make sense. Doesn't need to happen. It doesn't matter. She calls the police and gets a busy signal. Automated message due to the storm. No cavalry. Okay. She then calls Discount Howard Stern. Back at the Loomis place, Wynn has announced that he is retiring and is having a drink with his old friend Dr. Loomis. Wynn wants Loomis to come back and run the asylum in Wynn's place, despite the fact that they are at best both around the same age, although Loomis appears older. Why this makes any sense to Wynn is beyond me. It sort of makes sense later, but it is crappy and sloppy writing. Loomis declines. They hear Not Jamie over the radio, and so does Tommy. She warns that Michael is coming and pleads for Loomis to come help her. Shouldn't say anything about where she is or what happened, so she just comes off crazy. She then hangs up and makes her way into the bathroom downstairs. Not Jamie's baby is crying because even the child actor in this knows that this movie is crap. The lights go out, and Michael appears on the stairs and into the bathroom. Jamie is hiding. I think this is a good time to mention Michael looks like he's got a beer gut in this movie and kind of lumbers in an ungraceful way. It doesn't look great. I believe at one point they had an actor wear pads to appear bigger and more menacing. It doesn't work. He looks uncoordinated and sloppy. They're trying to compete with the Kane Hodder version, especially of Jason. It works for Jason. It does not work for Michael Myers. But also, this is Halloween 6, and killing teens is a young man's game. Geezer Michael Myers got the diabetes, and therefore has trouble with the stabbing. In the first film, Michael Myers is sleek and graceful, and machine-like. Here, he's got inflammation. And possibly plaque psoriasis. He methodically goes through each stall and finds them all empty. Not Jamie has escaped through a window and is back driving at high speeds again. Also in this movie, Not Jamie keeps driving 60 miles an hour from place to place. Michael Myers usually just appears about 5 minutes after she arrives anywhere. Does he take a bus, drive, fly? Who the hell knows? Also, how does he know where the hell she went? I don't know. This movie is not concerned with his transportation, but he constantly shows up at different places across town or large areas in seconds. Never makes logical sense. However, at least in this scene, it is shown that he is driving a van. Of course, we never see him stealing the van. He just has a van, kind of like the Scooby-Doo gang. And the van only features in one other scene, even though they covered their tracks on this one. The logistics just don't add up. Not Jamie has run off the road and ends up at a farm and takes refuge in a barn. More lightning, and we see Michael, but not Michael or something. I don't know. Because a minute later, he is not there. A little cat and mouse, and Not Jamie gets impaled on a hay thresher type machine. Not Jamie tells him he can't have the baby, and Michael turns on the thresher and walks off to find the baby is nowhere to be found. The next day, at the house of Kara Strode, some kids have posted a Michael Myers dummy on the lawn. You see, this is supposed to be Michael Myers' house that Kara is living in. The for sale sign is still on the lawn. Time out. For starters, this is absolutely not the house from the first film. Doesn't even look like it. Nor is it the house from the end of Halloween 5, which was a Victorian mansion. Again, not the house from the first film, not even close. The house from the first film is like a 2-story, normal, kind of middle-class 70s, 80s type house. It's not fancy. It doesn't have 3 floors. There's no dumbwaiter. I don't know. Anyway, additionally, the house in which Kara and Danny live in does not look at all like they just moved it in. Not by a long shot. Also, there is half of a truck on the lawn with stuff in it for some unknown reason never gets mentioned. Kara's alcoholic, abusive dad is pissed at the Michael Myers sign and takes it down. Later at the breakfast table, he berates Kara for leaving home at a young age and coming back some years later with a kid. The mom is timid, but tries to defend her daughter. Douchebag dad hits Kara. Eventually, Danny pulls the knife on abusive dad and points it at his crotch. I gotta admit, that's pretty cool. This is about, also warning sign, this is about as interesting as Danny ever gets in this movie. Kara gets Danny outside and ready for school while she gets ready for college. Kara has a younger surfer bro type brother named Timmy who Danny dresses up like for some reason. That's his Halloween costume. He's a total tool and isn't interesting or charismatic. His girlfriend is some kind of activist for Halloween or something. It's never really clear. No other character ever really listens to her much, so whatever. At Smith Grove, Wynn and Loomis are pulling records and files related to Michael Myers. Honestly, Loomis should know all of this by heart by now anyway, as we are, 6 movies in, 5 sequels. The secretary tells Loomis and Wynn that Not Jamie was found murdered upstate. Back to Kara. She is driving to college with Tim and his girlfriend, who apparently lives in the boarding house across the street, and who else lives there? Tommy Doyle. Kara asks about him and says she caught him peeping at her, but doesn't actually seem too upset. Seriously, in this movie she's never really as weirded out by him as she should be. It's very uneven. As they drive by, Tommy is staring out the window again. I'd also like to point out that in no other Halloween movie before or since is it established that a boarding house is across from the Michael Myers place. Tommy is listening in his room to the reel-to-reel tape he made of the radio show, and in the background of the recording he hears an announcement about bus departures. Tommy figures out that she was at the bus depot and goes there. He talks to the desk clerk and snoops around. He checks the phone booths and finds blood on the floor. A decent amount. Something that would be noticed in any normal scenario. Also, it's many hours later. No one noticed. No one cleaned this up. It couldn't have been more subtle to be believable. A couple little drops here and there. There's quite a bit of it. It leads him into the basement bathroom, which is empty for some reason in the middle of the day, and I'm assuming the woman's room, where he finds Not Jamie's baby. The baby was in the cabinet the whole time and has not made a peep for many hours, and no one's noticed. Right. Also, more blood in the bathroom. Again, no one cleaned it or noticed or cared. Not subtle. Tommy takes the baby and leaves. At the barn where Not Jamie was murdered, Wynn and Loomis show up and find a giant thorn symbol emblazoned on some hay. Loomis proclaims it's his mark. Why did he do this to the hay? Who knows? Also, how did he do it? It's pretty giant. And why is he setting fire to hay? He never set fire to hay in the other movies. Also, wouldn't they have eventually just caught fire in and of themselves? Ghosts? Cults? Scary? MTV editing? Something? I don't know. Also, why did the cops let Loomis and Wynn just kind of saunter onto the crime scene? And look around? Later at college, Kara drops the picture that Danny drew from earlier, and the back of the picture has the whole family as bloody stick figures, and Kara is concerned. Her douchebag brother does a super crappy and dated Beavis and Butthead impersonation. Kara's concerned. I'm concerned that she didn't notice earlier also. There's really no reason for her to be carrying this around or looking at it so much. Also, a faux grunge soundtrack plays in the background. Danny's picture features Thorn 2. Oh my god, history is repeating itself. Later, Tommy enters the hospital emergency room with a baby. Okay, who the fuck is the main character of this damn thing? Seriously. He asks for help at the front desk, and the head nurse asks him a single, simple question, and he just screams at her like he's a psycho that he needs a doctor, and immediately walks off. Then he sees Loomis and wanders up to him. The nurse calls security. Loomis doesn't remember him at first and then does. Obviously, it's been some time. We get some random exposition about bloodlines of Michael Myers and some half-baked ideas. Instead of asking for help or explaining anything, Tommy takes the baby and runs away from security, asking Loomis to meet him later at the Halloween festival. Back at the Myers house, Kara's timid mom is being watched by Michael. The camera is way too close to the back of his head, so it looks like somebody is wearing a giant gorilla mask standing in the street, and there is no cover, so she should have been very able to see him. In the basement, she is doing laundry, and their machine spills a bunch of water on the floor. Upstairs, she is accosted by Loomis, who just kind of broke into the house. He gives the pure evil and doom speech. She, to her credit, listens to him and calls her husband. Although, some guy just wandering into your house saying, "There's been a murder here, pure evil, blah, blah, blah." Yeah, you should be skeptical. You see, she didn't know it was the Myers house, and drunk dad, douchebag, husband guy moved the family in because he knew he could never sell the house with its history. It was a financial deal to do so. He begins to drink after this conversation because he is a douche. Tommy has brought the baby back to the boarding house and names him despite the fact that it's not his baby. He names the baby Stephen. I don't know why this bothers me so much, but it does. Mrs. Blankenship, the boarding house owner, walks by his door in a scene that sort of makes sense but is still dumb. This whole sequence is very unnecessary. In a throwback to the first movie, Danny is walking home with a pumpkin and sees the man in black a ways away. Tommy steps in front of Danny and scares him, causing him to drop the pumpkin. Tommy apologizes and they go home together. Meanwhile, timid mom is killed by Michael Myers in the backyard after she gets a call from the man in black demanding the child. Myers cuts her head off, and blood splatters on the laundry hanging up outside. Of course, later when the characters walk through the yard, they see no blood. Granted, Michael does put the sheets in the washer downstairs, but still. Honestly, Michael Myers is doing laundry now? But he's back in his house. Sort of. Kara comes home to find the house empty, and rushes upstairs and finds Tommy and Danny in Danny's room, hanging out. She is, again, not nearly as freaked out or angry about this as she should be, just seems mildly annoyed, even though this peeping Tom has taken her child unsupervised into her house and is just hanging out, alone, after being so weird the entire movie. But hey, whatever. Tommy chooses this moment to tell her Danny's room used to be Michael Myers. Danny likes Tommy for some reason. They end up in Tommy's apartment across the street. Again, why Kara would agree to this is beyond me. Tommy and her have no moments together that come across as endearing or disarming. It's just weird. She is scared of him one moment and then making fun of him the next, then kind of acting like everything is normal and he's just quirky. It's all over the damn place. Also, this middle part of the film sags and drags and it's just dull. Tommy tells Kara to watch her house through the camera that he was watching her naked with, and she sees his Michael Myers news clipping wall, and she reads all about Michael, and Danny looks out the window and sees Michael standing in the yard staring at him. Also, despite the fact that it was just afternoon and sunny, it's nighttime and pitch black out, and I think there's some lightning because, there always is. Danny tries to warn her, and Kara's like, yeah, not now. Danny seems to think it's just his imagination and doesn't press the issue. Now it's time for some exposition. Tommy boots up Windows 95 and we get another one of those annoying flash frame things that have been absent for about 30 minutes at this point, but at the beginning they were doing practically every other scene. Anywho, Tommy gives a speech about runes and the symbol of Thorn. We see some magic stones on the table, but guess what? This isn't the producer's cut, so that shot is pointless. There's some awkward editing and Kara seems bored and confused in equal measure. Again, some of the scene is lit with candles for no apparent reason. Basically, Tommy says that if the Druids sacrificed the lives of one family to the Thorn rune, the rest of the tribe would be spared. Of course, this makes no sense in the larger scheme of things, as Myers eventually kills everyone he comes across. So, what would making that deal even benefit someone? They even fold in some astrology into this exposition. Also, Sam Hain is actually pronounced Sawin. Fun fact. That's not in the movie, it's just how they pronounce it Sam Hain like everybody does, but it's actually Sawin. Tommy posits the cult is trying to make the babies Michael's final sacrifice. Why? Nobody knows. It is at this point they realize Danny is gone because responsible parenting. They find him watching TV downstairs with Mrs. Blankenship. Crazy boarding house owner Mrs. Blankenship. Tommy leaves to go rendezvous with Loomis and tells Kara to stay away from her house. Across the street should be good enough. Michael Myers respects property boundaries. Mrs. Blankenship tells Danny a story, and it's a good indication that she's got a case of the batshits. Outside it is thundering and lightning out, because it always is. When the lightning hits, you can see Michael out the window looking in. Why doesn't he come in? Like I said, property boundaries, or something. Or maybe it's runes, or stars, or tea leaves. Mrs. Blankenship says that Danny hears the voice, just like Michael Myers. And she was babysitting Michael on that fateful Hallows Eve. Of course she wasn't, because we've seen Halloween, and she is nowhere to be found. But yeah, sure, whatever. Mrs. Blankenship and Snoop Dogg and Moses were hanging out and babysitting Michael Myers. It's open season on retroactive continuity, and we're just gonna go for it. Also, how the hell does she know he hears voices? Even at 6, you wouldn't walk around telling people that. Necessarily. Not people you just met. At the hospital, Wynn and Loomis find out that not Jamie had given birth recently, and Loomis realizes the baby that Tommy had was not Jamie's. He then goes off to the Halloween festival. This is as good as any point to shift to different characters. We now have to follow Tim and his activist girlfriend. Discount Howard Stern takes to the stage, and Tim and his activist girlfriend go up too, to protest something, or make a comment on the town banning Halloween, or I don't know, no one gives a shit. It comes out that Tim lives in the Myers house, and Tim is freaked out as this is news to him. His girlfriend knew, but apparently didn't tell him until now. Discount Howard Stern decides he's going to broadcast from the house, and gets in the van to drive over. But he got in the wrong van, Michael's van, and Michael kills him. As Tommy is walking around, he finds that Discount Howard Stern was wrapped in Christmas lights and hung dead in a tree, despite the fact that the tree is in the middle of the fairgrounds, and everyone would have been able to see Michael putting him there in the tree. As well as the fact that there are tons of people around, and it's fairly well lit. Drunk douche dad finally comes home and goes to the basement, where Michael electrocutes him, and eventually his head explodes. Remember the leaky washer? It's come back to the plot and killed someone. I see what you did there. Tim and girlfriend go back to the house, where she tells him about Michael Myers, and of course her recap is not accurate. So they decide to have sex in Kara's bed for some reason. By candlelight, because the power went out, mainly because of douchebag dad getting barbecued. Tim immediately goes to take a shower for some reason. I imagine that they would have to restart the pilot light, so it would be a cold shower, but who knows. Logic be damned. Michael hands him a towel to dry off before killing him, because Michael is nothing if not considerate. Kara, across the street, watches the girlfriend get killed through Tommy's camera and gets all freaked out. She then goes over to the house after Danny runs over there for no reason. Watch your friggin' kid for once. God. We get some more single-screen flashes. Kara goes back to the Myers house to run after Danny. She grabs a fireplace poker and heads upstairs. She finds Tim and his girlfriend dead. She also finds Danny alive and sends him downstairs. In one of my favorite parts of the movie, Myers starts coming after Kara, and she slams the door in his face and backs away. It takes an inordinate amount of time for him to come through the door for some reason. He was only like 3 steps away, but she backs up like 10 feet before the door opens. The next part I like is that she hides on the stairs and hits old Mikey Myers on the head, and he tumbles down the stairs. It's kind of smart and a little funny. This sets up one of my least favorite scenes in the film. Michael is passed out at the bottom of the stairs, and nobody watching this in their right mind thinks that he's dead or unconscious really for any amount of time, because they never are. Like I said, Michael is passed out on the bottom of the stairs, and Kara ends up on one side of him and Danny on the other. Oh God, what's gonna happen? She tells Danny he has to step over Michael, and then they can leave. But they don't have to at all. Danny could just quickly walk around to the other side of the house. But if that happened, they wouldn't get this scene, which is like in every friggin' horror movie ever that they have to step over somebody who is quote-unquote dead or unconscious. Ugh. But he steps over, and just as they are about to leave, Michael grabs Kara's ankle and she screams. Big surprise. They run back to Tommy's boarding house thing. Meanwhile, Loomis and Tommy have reconnected at the fair and are in Tommy's house wondering where Kara is. They run up to the house and are let in by Loomis, who closes and locks the door in a pursuing Michael's face. We get more faux grunge soundtrack with a stupid wailing guitar solo that for the rest of the movie they shoehorn in every few minutes to be scary, I guess. I never found guitar solos to be scary, but somebody did. The slam door sort of stops Michael for some reason. Again, makes no sense. Property boundaries, I guess. I don't know. Once all of our characters are in the boarding house, Wynn reveals himself to be the Man in Black, and some of the cult members are inside the house. Mrs. Blankenship is in on it. They now have the baby, and Danny, and so on. Wynn gives some exposition, and Kara runs upstairs where the cult members corner her in Tommy's room. She does the only sensible thing. She throws herself out the window, right through the glass. Yeah. In the next scene, the boarding house is empty, and Loomis and Tommy are on the lawn, and they say like they feel like they've been drugged. But we didn't see them get drugged. We didn't even see like a real quick shot of a needle going into skin or something. I don't know why they left this out. It would not have been at all that much more to shoot or been expensive. Hell, they probably have stock footage of a needle going in skin, and you could just have Paul Rudd or the late great Donald Pleasance go, "Ah!" Or, "Don't inject me," as sound, and it would have been fine. Anyway, as they're standing on the lawn, pretending to be groggy, Loomis replies that because they have been drugged, even though we never saw this as an audience, and it seems like they've only been asleep for 5 minutes. Loomis accurately surmises that this is going to end at Smith Grove Sanitarium. This is where Kara wakes up in a padded room. She is locked in and hears other people screaming. Loomis and Tommy go into the asylum through a back door, and Loomis wanders off in one direction, Tommy the other. We have now entered the finale of the movie, which even though has a neat chase sequence, it's kind of funny. The cat and mouse chase seems really tedious. But let's get into it. Loomis goes into Wynn's office with a gun, and instead of shooting him like he just should, Wynn plays it like they are old friends, and there's a lot of exposition, worried Loomis wouldn't make it. Wynn wants Loomis to join them, saying he could be the future, despite that Loomis is fucking 175 years old. And basically the same age as Wynn. How is he the future? I don't get it. Anyway. Wynn says that not Jamie's baby is going to be the key to something, or power, or whatever. The details are hazy. Loomis gets knocked out from behind by a cult member, and he tells Wynn that they are ready for them. Meanwhile, a crazy lady appears out of no one and talks to Tommy after he enters a maximum security ward that is for some reason unlocked and unguarded. Lots of dramatic lighting. The crazy lady is a dumb jump scare that exists for little reason. She is stabbed, so scary, I guess? He then hears Kara in one of the rooms and busts down the door with a fire extinguisher. Michael shows up. We get another electric guitar squeal that does nothing to add to the movie and is not scary. At the last moment, the door breaks up and Tommy and Kara run away. Although, I always wonder at this scene if it would have been safer just to leave Kara in there and run away from Michael. But hey, whatever. They slam jail bars between them and Michael, grabs Kara's hair, and then Tommy shoots him in the chest with a beanbag gun. He flies back, and Tommy and Kara run off. We find ourselves back in the steamy tube area, from the beginning. It's still tubey and still steamy. Then suddenly around a corner, they are back in a hospital, and Wynn is getting ready to operate, or something. Maybe the baby. I don't know. Kara and Tommy steal the baby and Danny back. They also hide from Michael. He begins to kill Wynn and all the other people in the operating room. Why? Who knows? Why did he wait? Who knows? Nothing matters. Doesn't have to make sense. Michael was in league with the cult members until he wasn't, but the rune protected them from evil, and they were controlling him, but they weren't, and he just got bored, and diabetes. While Michael kills the doctors, we get some flashy lights, because that will distract the audience from what a crappy movie this is. In a funny turn of events, they run back through the tubes, and behind them is one of the cult member orderlies. Kara and Tommy close the iron bars in his face, and he begs them for help. Why would you think they would want to help you as you've been on the side of the cult the entire time up until now? But hey, who knows? Everybody's the hero of their own story, I guess. I guess Bob Evil, the cult orderly, wasn't as bad as everyone thought he was. Anyway, Michael kills him by smashing him into the gate until the door falls down. More running through hospital halls that don't really make logical sense of where they are in the hospital. This is where they enter my favorite room, the creepy experiment room with fetuses and weird fish tanks and green mood lighting with green liquid in various tanks. Other than to be creepy, this room doesn't make much sense. The cult wants to get not Jamie's baby. They don't need to cultivate other babies if it's the bloodline of Michael Myers that's important. No, we just get, how about a generic, nonsensical, scary Spirit Halloween operation room for our finale? Our main characters hide. Tommy comes out and tells Michael that he's won and gives him the baby wrapped in a towel. Psych! It was one of the weird fish tank babies. Maybe that's the entire reason they wrote this scene in that weird room. Problem is, the real baby makes a noise and distracts Michael. This gives Tommy time, however, to get a bunch of syringes filled with green goo and inject Michael. Michael then grabs Tommy by the neck and lifts him up. He then throws him, and Mikey is feeling a little woozy. Kara then comes out of nowhere and hits him in the face a bunch of times with a metal pipe. He gets beat up for a while, then almost kills her before going after Danny and not Jamie's baby. Danny and not Jamie's baby have hidden behind some oil drum things, and old Mikey is too fat to fit in, but he tries anyway. Tommy injects him with more green goo, and then hits him some more with a pipe. This extra syringe and pipe hitting has done it, not the 5 minutes prior that they've done this same thing to no effect. As Tommy hits him, green goo runs out of his eyes and ears as Tommy pummels him some more with the pipe. Why is he shooting out green goo? Who the hell knows? Danny, Kara, and the baby run off, and eventually meet up with Loomis, who gets them to safety. Then we get more footage of Tommy that is triple cut of various angles of the same take for no reason, and some more guitar squeals. It is so stupid. Tommy saunters off. Later, outside in the car, Loomis tells them to go and that he has business to take care of. Tommy and crew drive off. We cut to the weird operating room where Michael's mask is on the ground, but no Michael. We hear Loomis screaming in the background somewhere in the halls, and that's the end of the movie. As of the recording of this podcast, this storyline has remained dead and unresolved. It is commonly referred to as the Thorn Trilogy, which does a disservice to Halloween 4 and maybe Halloween 5. Granted, I'm not a huge Halloween 5 fan, but I guess my biggest problem with it, besides them just killing Rachel for no reason in the middle with very little ceremony, she deserves better than that, but Halloween 5 is just really bland and doesn't really seem to know what it wants to do. Not in the way that this film does, but it just kind of goes along and paints by numbers and is pretty generic. And then at the end, they're in Michael Myers' house, but suddenly it's this, triple-story Victorian mansion kind of thing. I don't know, doesn't work. I had to do this episode. This movie was so dumb and unfocused and poorly edited, I couldn't let it stand. Little did I know, to make this episode, I ended up watching it another 6 times. There are many problems with this film, but I think the most glaring and fundamental are as follows. Who is the main character, and what is the plot? The main character by default, I would say, is probably Kara Strode, as things revolve around her and Danny. That being said, we spend a lot of time cutting back and forth to see what Loomis and Wynn are doing, Kara's brother and his girlfriend, whose names I've already forgotten because I don't care about them at all, Kara's parents, not Jamie, and Tommy. I mean, honestly, I'm not really sure why Jamie is in this movie, even just to kill her off, to like tie off that thread. It's pretty pointless. I mean, do we need her baby? Doesn't the cult want Danny, or does the cult want the baby? I don't. As a result, this movie feels aimless, as though it doesn't know who to focus on, and so by focusing in on everybody, we basically focus on nobody. The writing lets everyone down. Kara Strode is very uninteresting. Not because of the actress, I don't blame her, but she doesn't really have much to do. She just kind of wanders through the script, she throws herself out a window for no reason, she doesn't have any real good lines. It's one of those cases of the character in each scene is different, just depending on what they decided they wanted her character to do in that scene. She's completely reactionary, sort of. Like I said, she's not totally creeped out by Tommy, even though she should be, and then sometimes she's teasing him in this weird, awkward way. They never really figured out what they want that relationship to be. I mean, we as an audience don't have any kind of emotional attachment to her, partially because we spend so much time ping-ponging around. Her son Danny is important to the plot at certain times, ignored at other parts. I mean, I don't blame the actresses or the actors in this film for this script. Had nothing for them to work with. There's no organic chemistry between any of the characters, really. Tommy is also never fleshed out as a character. I don't necessarily know what his motives are. The movie gives us that he is obsessed with Michael Myers. We know that he was present for the events of the original Halloween, and it messed him up, understandably so. But what is his character motivations? Does he want to kill Michael, simply stop him like Loomis, and lock him up? Is he traumatized, or obsessed, or both? Is he crazy? Is he not crazy? Is he crazy, but like in an understandable way, like the later Chucky movies with Andy being an adult and kind of scarred and freaked out from the whole fact that he spent most of his childhood with a doll trying to kill him? That makes sense in that movie and show. Not so much in this. We also really don't know what his research did for him, as it doesn't feature much into the plot except for that one exposition scene where he's talking with a bunch of lit candles for no reason, with his fancy Windows 95 computer screensaver of Michael's mask. I don't, where did he do this research? Is any of it valid? How does he know? They're giving me nothing here. This idea of a traumatized character is done right in the David Gordon Green Halloween 2017 film. However you feel about the sequels to that, and there are feelings to be had for sure, the idea of catching up with a character that many years on who's been traumatized every year, even if nothing happens, they're constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop for Michael to come back. Done very artfully in Halloween 2017, as well as how that trauma transcends generations to her daughter and her granddaughter. Unfortunately, with the sequels to that, they kind of screwed that up, but the first one works very well. Tommy has a similar issue in the film as Kara, as he reacts oddly to various situations. I mean, seriously, I'm not sure if he's nuts or impatient or whatever. That scene that comes to mind is the hospital scene where he asks for a doctor, and the nurse is like, okay, what's going on? What do you need a doctor for? And he just yells, I need a doctor! And then he wanders off, doesn't wait for her to respond. It's really weird. He has a lot of other moments in the film like that. Probably not as unhinged as that one that I can think of off the top of my mind, but it's just weird line deliveries and reactions. Again, I don't blame Paul Rudd. I don't know what the character's supposed to be, and neither do anybody in the movie. Secondly, I have no idea what the Cult of Thorn in the movie is trying to do. I don't know what their aim is. It seems to be to amass power or fortune unto themselves, but eventually Michael just gets tired of waiting and slaughters them unprovoked. So what was the whole point of being in the cult and doing this thing if they could ostensibly control Michael Myers for him to just be like, I'm tired of this. I'm going to kill everybody. Winning the cult somehow explained how Michael keeps coming back year after year, but overall that's still pretty flimsy. We get exposition about druids and constellations. None of this makes much sense, even within the context of the movie. The movie is inconsistent with itself. That's the problem. Also, there is a line in there from Tommy that says something to the effect of, everyone who occupies the Myers house he considers family. That's BS. Since when? And if that is true, then the whole idea of him needing to kill the bloodline makes even less sense, because if he considers you his bloodline for moving in, then everybody's technically his bloodline, whether you're related to him or not, as long as you've got real estate. Also, when are the Strodes going to stop falling into Michael Myers traps? Although in this housing market, I suppose that if you got enough of a discount, you would move in. Michael be damned. In the beginning of the film and throughout, it is implied that the cult wants Danny and that he is important. There is also all the stuff that Danny hears, voices like Michael did. This sort of comes from the Halloween novelization of the first film written by Richard Curtis. Came out in 1979. It adds elements to the story that weren't present in the film to kind of pad out the book. This is actually something movie tie-in novels tend to do a lot. They add stuff, extra scenes, more exposition. Sometimes a novelization of a movie would be pretty short in the grand scheme of things, as film is a visual medium. So, also what happens is they'll get a script well in advance to write the novelization, and then the movie script will go through changes, and they don't update the writer. So sometimes novelizations are wildly different. Sometimes they've got extra details. It's a whole thing. It's pretty cool, actually, to read those. I read the Batman 89 novelization recently, and there's some extra sequences and scenes in there that don't happen in the movie. There's a whole piece in the middle where Batman in the daytime is riding a horse, going after the Joker, and the mayor unveils a statue that's supposed to be the mayor, I guess, himself or somebody, and the Joker swapped it out to be a statue. It's a whole action set piece that did not make the movie. But it was cool to read anyway and have an alternate view of that. A lot of horror novelizations based on movies are now hard to find and are sought after by collectors of horror items and nerds. Introduces the Curse of Sam Hain in the 79 novel. I read somewhere that the book mentions that Michael Myers' grandfather also heard voices and that young Michael did. This is really all just in that novelization. It's never really mentioned anywhere else except for Halloween 6. I'm still not sure why Danny is important. It kind of seems like he's cursed to take up the mantle of being Mike Myers, then he gets taken by the cult at the end, but they take not Jamie's baby as well. The baby was intended to be a sacrifice, but I'm not sure, was Danny going to do the sacrifice? Was he going to turn into Michael? Were they going to kill Danny and make the baby the new Michael? It's obvious at the end of the movie, Michael basically starts killing them and doesn't seem to care about the cult at all, so what was the point of his wrist tattoo? Was Danny supposed to get the transferred evil, and if so, would the cult be able to control him? It's implied that they control Michael Myers, but honestly, he just does whatever he wants. We've seen that. Why put up with the cult at all in the first place? Film makes little sense. The editing in this film is also atrocious. Things are triple cut, and there are random flashes of Michael's knife or a mask coming up out of nowhere with squealing guitars or screams. It is intended to add to the scare factor, but comes up amateurish and dumb. This whole movie seems like a very cheap carnival spook house kind of ride. Dumb jump scares and it's a scary sound because we as a culture have decided that scary sounds are, squealy guitars. I don't know. This movie acts as a sequel to events established in Halloween 4 and 5. In Halloween 4, we are introduced to Michael's niece Jamie, whose mom was Laurie Strode and the ambulance guy from Halloween 2. See, I don't remember his name either, but at least he was kind of cute. They supposedly died in a crash at some point, and Jamie is living with foster parents. They are mostly nice and normal. That movie establishes that Michael is driven to kill his family, and he goes after his niece, which, love it or hate it, is at least a direction they picked, and they were consistent with it in that movie, for sure. He's defeated and tries again in Halloween 5. Okay, we've continued that theme. At the end of Halloween 5, Michael again is captured and put in a jail cell. Then the Man in Black comes in with a gun and kills everyone in the police station and frees Michael. The end. Who is the Man in Black? Well, we know because of this movie, it's Dr. Wynn, but they didn't know at the end of Halloween 5. They had him in jail, the filmmakers didn't know how to get him out, or what to do, so they made up the Man in Black character without knowing who he was or why, because that wasn't their problem. They were ending their movie. Somebody else would have to figure that out. This film answers that question and introduces the concepts of the Cult of Forlorn, but it is minimized, as they didn't know where they wanted to go with it. Of course, they had to come up with this while writing Part 6. Ultimately, this movie is just a mess. It's terrible. I don't know that I'll ever watch it again. I don't wish to. Halloween 5, made on a budget of around $5 million, made $11 million at the box office, which is not really great, and the lowest of the franchise. Generally, these movies were made for around $5 million or less, and they aimed to make around $20 million. That's what the Friday the 13th movies did around the same time. They would make, $1 or $2 million movies, and they knew that they could reliably get close to about 20. Halloween 6 went into production anyway. I'm not necessarily sure why. To be fair, it was done some years later due to the lukewarm reception of Part 5. They thought maybe they could do an update or a reboot in some way, soft reboot, to try to get the franchise going again. Big surprise, the production for Halloween 6 was trouble. At one point, there was consideration that it would take place in space, and possibly John Carpenter might be involved in some way, shape, or form. There was also a rights battle, which ended up with Halloween being acquired by Miramax. At one point, Quentin Tarantino was asked to write a draft that was ultimately never completed, and then he recommended Evil Dead 2 writer Scott Spiegel to write it. There was ideas and scripts flying around everywhere for several years. Apparently, Quentin's idea was that the Man in Black and Michael would go on a road trip and start killing people, a la Natural Born Killers. None of these things happened. There were ideas that someone who wasn't Michael Myers would impersonate him and go on a killing spree. Miramax wanted a movie that incorporated all the prior sequels in the franchise so they could tie off all the loose ends and kind of connect everything. There were at least 10 different versions of the script, and they were rewriting while filming to boot. It's no real surprise that the end product was a mess. The director Joe Chappelle also wasn't interested in horror movies or the Halloween franchise, which makes me angry in that it is insulting to the fans. That's not fair. We love these movies, we spend our money on merch, and we go see them, and we buy t-shirts, and we rent them, and we buy the special edition DVDs, even for films that we don't like as much as others in the franchise. It's not fair to set out and be like, I'm going to make this, but I don't really care about it. Because we as the fans do. But Chappelle saw this as a good way to further his career. He did go on to make several other films and TV episodes and did have a career doing things other than horror. Ultimately, there were way too many cooks in the kitchen, which resulted in a movie stitched together with disparate ideas and no real focus. No one on this film really agreed with anyone else, so that's why things are all over the map. Like I said prior, I don't blame the actors. I don't think anyone could have acted their way out of this mess. I'm a supporter of Jamie Lloyd, and there's been a couple of different stories. Apparently, she wanted a small increase to return to the role of Jamie, and they turned her down. I've also heard that she wasn't considered, or they wanted to age her up, and the actress, Danielle Harris, still looked a little too young. I don't really know what the thing is. This is something I dislike from the get-go, but it's the way they landed. I thought she really did awesome as Jamie in Part 4 and 5, and brought a gravity to those movies with her performance. It's underrated. She did really well, especially at that young age. I couldn't do that. I can't do it now. Hell. She deserved to at least be in this film, but then again, this film didn't really deserve her considering what it does the least with Jamie. I'm not even sure why the character is in this movie. Again, like I said, the importance of her seems tenuous at best, other than to just tie everything down. Also, the toned down incest angle is also pretty gross and weird. They sort of left it in, but they sort of didn't. I don't know. They screened the movie to test audiences, and surprise, it didn't go well. Unfortunately, they decided that the only way to fix it was to add the faux grunge soundtrack and squealy guitars and flash cuts and triple edits to make it look like a crappy music video from 1995. One of the ideas that was pitched and possibly written for the film focused on Tommy Doyle. He was the main character. A decision! He had a thorn tattoo on his wrist like Michael and was obsessed with what happened to him as a kid. While this raises some questions as to the direction of the story, it's already more stable and more sensical than what we got. Let's say we start off with Tommy and getting to know him and his obsessions and maybe what his motivations are. Then maybe we introduce Jamie Lloyd character and they meet up and try to evade Michael together. That way we're tying the strands of both those films and franchises, or parts of the franchise I should say, together. And we don't need Kara. That's a more straightforward and altogether better base of a film. Does anyone really care about Kara Strode? No. She's only in this movie. She's kind of a cousin. She's just tacked on. Everyone else in this movie is a legacy character. Kara is just the cousin. We know very little about her, and then to this date is ignored. Post and prior. The Tommy-centric version of this film would have gone into more detail about the Curse of Thorn and such. Again, the Curse storyline is not that best, but at least in this theoretical Tommy movie, they would have been more concrete reasoning and logic around the Thorn element of the story. They would have at least committed to an idea and gone with it. I'm not gonna lie. The 90s was a rough time for horror films and horror fans. The old standard bearers of the past struggled in the decade. Freddy, Michael, Leatherface, Jason, Chucky, Pinhead, and the Leprechaun all ran out of steam and ideas. Freddy was dead. Leatherface was reimagined in a weird sequel with a pre-fame Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey that was just a mess. That film was actually shot about 2.5 years before it was released, and only released because Renee Zellweger and Matthew McConaughey started to make a name for themselves in Hollywood. So then they plastered their names and faces all over the poster to try to make a couple of bucks. Pinhead and the Leprechaun went to space, along with Jason. And Jason also went to hell. Chucky went to military school. While there were some bright spots in the 90s, such as Candyman and People Under the Stairs, until Scream in 1996, the horror genre was kind of aimless and doomed to diminished returns and shrinking budgets. Scream reinvented the genre of the slasher movie, but the next few years in its wake were just a bunch of Scream clones and sequels. More on that in a different episode. Halloween 6 in 1995 is a casualty of its time, as well as too many cooks in the kitchen, and trying to do way too much with one film and not really focus on any one thing. What if I told you there was an alternate cut of Halloween 6? What if I told you it fixed a lot of the problems of the theatrical cut? Well, it's true, and luckily the producer's cut was officially released a few years ago and is easily accessible. I'm going to go over the main changes and discuss what I think of the producer's cut. It doesn't fix a lot of the problems, but it fixes some of them, and is much more consistent with itself. One of the complaints when they screened the film was that it wasn't energetic enough. That's why we get the flash cuts and the movie jumps around and never focuses on one thing. Attention deficit theater. Well, first off, the producer's cut has no flashy or cuts or crappy faux grunge rock soundtrack. All gone. While not Jamie being wheeled around in the bowels of the sanitarium to give birth still happens, the visual effects are more subdued and is much less amateurish looking. The music is just your standard John Carpenter theme and some other appropriate and effective Halloween movie music. It's already much better. The beginning is similar, but the opening narration is from Loomis, which makes more sense in general, because we've been with him the entire time. He's been in every Halloween movie up until this point. Tommy wanders in and out, right? He's in the first one, and then we don't hear from him again till the sixth one, and then they bring him back in the David Gordon Green films. He's not nearly as consistent as Dr. Loomis, therefore Dr. Loomis should do the narration. There is some more dialogue between Dr. Wynn and Loomis, and that storyline is more developed in the producer's cut. Granted, are still speeches about Loomis being the future of the asylum, despite him being old and retired and all that. There was a longer version of them going to the asylum and talking with the secretary. There's more dialogue and callers into the radio show in the beginning. Kara's comforting of Danny after his nightmare is a little longer and definitely less awkward than the theatrical cut. She comes off a little more motherly and kind of fully developed as a character. Even just that little extra few seconds of acting and makes her character a little more in-depth and gives her more purpose and at least lets us know who she is way better than the cut. One of the bigger surprises in the producer's cut, not Jamie is not killed at the farm. She's found alive, she's taken to the hospital and put on life support. Of course, later on the man in black sneaks in and shoots her in the head, so her surviving really doesn't make much of a difference anyway, only for her to be bedridden and then murdered randomly in the middle. The movie also has a flashback scene to the end of Halloween 5 where it implies that there was a big explosion that the cult members used to cover up the fact that they kidnapped both Michael and Jamie. This is a lot better as the ending of 5 doesn't imply anything and you're kind of wondering how Michael and Jamie got to this place anyway and why they disappeared. Again, big plot holes in the theatrical cut. At least this version of the film goes a lot longer in the way of explaining those things. The biggest change comes for the finale. Remember the scene I made fun of earlier where Loomis and Tommy stumble around on the lawn and say we've been drugged? Well, after that in the producer's cut, the movie is completely different. They go to the sanitarium where Kara is tied up in the sacrificial chamber that we saw in the beginning of the film. The baby and Michael are there. Loomis still goes to Wynn's office and they still knock him out, and I think there's a little more talking if I remember right. But it's the same thing. But instead of going to the operating room, they go to the altar. Tommy steals a cult robe and sneaks into the sacrifice room. Tommy rescues Kara, Danny, and the baby and is pursued by Michael. They are then trapped in the hallway at that barred section, and Loomis appears and shoots the gate control, like in the theatrical cut. Meanwhile, Tommy lays down the stones of light he had from earlier in a circle. I knew those would come back. Michael steps into the middle of them, and Tommy says Sam Hain, which makes Michael stop dead in his tracks and freezes. He remarks that it works. Kara and Tommy and the rest take off in the Jeep, and Loomis says to go on without him and that he has business to attend to. He goes back to Michael and takes off his mask. He finds that the man under the mask is Dr. Wynn. Wynn then wakes up and grabs Loomis, telling him that it is his game now. Loomis looks at his arm and finds that the mark of thorn is now upon his wrist. He begins to scream. We then cut to Michael, who is in an alleyway somewhere underground. He is dressed in the Man in Black's clothes, and he stops and turns back at the scream of Loomis. There's a cool kind of silhouette shadow shot of his face. The end. Yeah, no weird fetus operating room or green goo spewing from Michael's face. So is the producer's cut superior? Yes, it is. I think so anyway. I mainly think so because even though the Thorn storyline is kind of wonky, this version of the film at least sticks to that idea consistently. It's bad enough to have a movie based on a shaky premise. At least the producer's cut goes with it and commits. This cut makes more sense in the grand scheme of things, whereas the theatrical cut just watered everything down and jumps around, with a lot of scenes that just kind of go from one place to another. We understand better where Jamie and Michael have been the past 6 years, how they got there, a little bit better on the what the cult actually want to achieve. Again, there's no weird fetus babies for no reason. You get the stones that Tommy used, the magic stones. For some reason, they leave that shot in the theatrical cut, even though those stones are not important in the theatrical cut. Does that mean the producer's cut saves the movie? No. It's still a mess, and has all the other issues that I pointed out. Kara is still Kara. Danny is still unclear as to why they want or need him. However, it raises the film's score, if you will, at least for me. I would still probably rate this film as the worst of the franchise. You can argue with me all you want. Even probably lower than Halloween Ends, which I hated and was dreadful. For several reasons. However, I think that film holds up a small bit better than this one. This is certainly an interesting experiment to watch both cuts back to back, to see how editing and story decisions can impact a movie. However, Halloween 6 is a train wreck that doesn't offer viewers much more than an angry confusion and frustration, and maybe a little goo shooting out of your face. Perhaps that is the true curse of Michael Myers.